guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Trisha, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you two of my favorite bakes or casserole recipes. Let's get straight on with today's recipes. I'm going to start off with one which is a Greek moussaka inspired dish. In fact, this is the vegetarian or a vegan version of the Greek moussaka. Moussaka uses eggplant. I use the round version of the eggplant or the aubergine. This is what I had in the fridge and what I needed to use up. So I'm just going to go ahead with these. You'd need about 3 to 4 eggplants of this size for one casserole. I'm also going to use a couple of potatoes. We're going to start prepping to make our moussaka by simply peeling up our potatoes and cutting them into slices. I tend to keep these slices a little on the thicker side. Sprinkle a little salt on the potatoes. You want to season them but not overdo it because you're going to season this dish every step of the way. A little drizzle of olive oil goes on top, and I'm just going to toss everything around, making sure that some of that oil and salt gets onto all the slices of potatoes. And then I'm simply going to lay it on a baking sheet that I've lined with my silicone baking mat, and I'm going to bake these at about 200 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 minutes to begin with, or until they're done. I would definitely recommend checking them at that 15 to 20 minute mark and then decide how much longer you need to keep it in the oven. I'm going to repeat the same process with the eggplant. Instead of cutting them into round disc slices, since these are the skinny eggplants, I'm just going to go lengthways just to make it easier and save time. If you're using the slightly rounder version of the eggplants, I would recommend just cutting them into slices like we did with the potatoes. Sprinkle a little salt, some olive oil, toss that well, place them on a baking sheet and pop them into the oven to bake along with the potatoes. On to the next layer of that moussaka. Typically that's lamb, but today we're going to use an assortment of vegetables. I've got 3 cloves of garlic over here. I've got some onion, some celery, and some carrot. I've also got some mushrooms that we're going to throw in. I've got about 8 to 10 cup mushrooms over here, and I'm also going to use about 5 of these smaller portabello mushrooms. Next, what we're going to do is chop up all of our veggies. I'm slicing the little mushrooms into thickish slices and then just cutting them down the middle. I'm going to try and maintain a similar sizing for the rest of the veggies as well. For the portabello mushrooms, I'm just going to cut them up into thick cubes like you can see here. Next, we're getting on to the veggies. We'll start off by chopping the onions, the celery, and the carrot into small dice. I'm going to try and make sure that these are all on the smaller side. While we were chopping our veggies, the potatoes and the eggplants are done. You want them just about cooked through, but you don't want either the eggplant or the potatoes to go mushy. We're going to set this aside and start with cooking our vegetable mix. I've just got a large pan on some medium heat. I'm going to drizzle a little olive oil in here. And we're first going to start off by cooking off that onion. I like adding the onion first so that it gets a little bit of an opportunity to cook down before the vegetables go in. So I'm going to saute them for a couple of minutes till they just about start softening. Once that happens, I'm going to add in both the carrot and the celery. Once all the veggies have had a chance to sweat out a little and have softened a bit, I'm going to add in those 3 cloves of garlic crushed. Give it a little stir to make sure that the garlic doesn't burn. Now add in some red chili flakes. These ones that I have right now are exceptionally hot, so I'm just going in with a little bit. Basically add in how much chili you'd like. Next, I'm going to add in about half a teaspoon of dried oregano and a little sprinkling of some black pepper powder. Again, you can adjust this quantity to taste. Give that a little bit of a stir to mix the spices through. And then add in your chopped mushrooms. Give everything a good stir, and you're going to let these mushrooms cook off for a couple of minutes. Next, add in about a couple of tablespoons of tomato paste. Stir that tomato paste through, and we're going to let this cook off for a few minutes. The moisture from the mushrooms will add a little moisture into the pan as it cooks and will help you deglaze the pan as well. Just make sure that you've got it on about a medium to medium-high heat, not much hotter than that because the spices at the bottom of the pan may burn. Lastly, I'm going to season this lot off with a little salt to taste. Give this a good stir through, and we're going to let this continue cooking for another couple of minutes or until that tomato paste or puree has cooked through and that rawness of flavor goes. Then simply take the pan off the heat, and now all that's left to do is to make our final element, which is our white sauce. For this, I'm going to heat another pan on some medium heat. In goes about a spoonful of oil. This is just to help prevent the butter from burning. Next, I'm adding in about 2 tablespoons of butter. Here I'm using Nuttelex, which is a plant-based spread. And once that has melted, I'm going to add in about 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Stir that through, and you're going to let that flour cook off on a medium heat for a little while. I usually toast this off for a couple of minutes or so, or till you start getting a hint of a nutty aroma from the pan, which means that that flour has lost its rawness, and you can then proceed. Again, keep in mind that you're not looking for this to change color. You're just looking for that flour to cook off a little bit. Next, I'm going to add in some soy milk. I've used about 2 cups of soy milk over here, and I'm going to add this gradually into the pan. I'm going to start off with a little splash, and as that thickens, I'm going to go in with the rest. Make sure that you keep stirring this sauce as you add the milk. You don't want any major lumps developing in this sauce. If you're having any problem with breaking down those lumps, you can switch over and use a whisk instead. That makes it a little easier to handle. We're going to season the sauce with a little salt to taste. Stir that through, check for seasoning, and add more salt as needed. Remember, for this particular sauce, you can add a little cheese at the end, so adjust your salt levels accordingly. Next, I'm going to add in a little bit of mustard. I've got hot English mustard on hand, so that's what I'm adding. This is about half a teaspoon or so. You can also use Dijon mustard if that's what you've got. Stir that through so that that mustard dissolves well. And we're also going to add in a little bit of nutmeg. You can just add nutmeg powder if you've got that. I happen to have whole nutmeg. If you can get your hands on whole nutmeg, grate a little bit of it in. But keep in mind that the grated whole nutmeg tends to be more flavorful and more potent. All you want is a little pinch of that grated nutmeg in there to give it a hint of nutmeg flavor. You don't want that to overpower your sauce. Once your sauce has thickened up, take it off the heat and set it aside. Add the cheese at this stage and stir that through, and the residual heat in the pan will help that cheese melt. This time around, I've decided to leave the cheese out. This sauce is really tasty even without the cheese. You're now ready to assemble your casserole. Today I'm using an 8-inch square baking dish because that's what I have available. And I'm going to start by layering the potatoes right at the bottom of the dish. Next, I'm going to add the roasted eggplant in there. And over here, I'm going to put them really close to one another because I want a nice even layer of the eggplant as well. Next, add in your mushroom mix and pour over that white sauce over the mushrooms. Make sure to get in all of the corners as well. Pop this into an oven that's preheated at 200 degrees Celsius, and you're going to let this bake off for about 15 to 20 minutes or until the top is nice and bubbling and starts developing a tiny bit of color. Fresh out of the oven, this is what your beautiful vegan moussaka is going to look like. Now, I have a little extra roasted eggplant left over, and this I'm just going to set aside in a container. Roasted eggplant makes a really delicious filling in sandwiches, of course coupled with a few other elements as well, or as a side dish to another meal as well. I also had a little bit of the potato slices left over. I'm going to put that into a container as well. Set this aside in the fridge until I'm ready to use it next. Now all that's left to do is dig into that beautiful moussaka. Today I'm going to serve this along with some garlic bread, a salad on the side, and some cucumber slices. For our next bake, we're making a spicy bean and spinach bake or casserole. I'm going to start off by making the spicy beans. Guys, this casserole is so full of flavor. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I often ask myself why I don't make this more regularly. Anyway, back to the recipe. We're going to start by making the beans. Now, in a pan, I've got a little bit of oil. I'm going to add a couple of cloves of garlic that I finely minced. And after giving the garlic a good stir, I'm just going to add a little bit of passata to the pan. Now you can use store-bought tinned baked beans if you'd like, but I find that making it yourself adds so much of flavor, and it's really such a simple recipe that I'm sharing with you today. I've added about a quarter cup of passata. To this I'm going to add a little bit of chili flakes. This is a spicy bean mix, hence the chili flakes. If you don't want to make it too spicy, you can either cut down on the amounts or leave it out. That's up to you. I'm going to add a little bit of black pepper powder to taste, a touch of salt to season it up, and stir everything around. To this, I'm going to add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. This is about a teaspoon or so. This just rounds up all those flavors really well. If you follow a plant-based diet, just make sure that the Worcestershire sauce that you're using is vegan friendly. Stir everything through and add in about 2 to 3 tablespoons of your favorite barbecue sauce. Give everything a good stir, and you're going to let this cook off for a little while more, just a couple of minutes or so, to let all of those flavors come together. Once that happens, go ahead and taste your sauce. If it is still on the tart side, add in a little bit of sugar. I've gone in with about a teaspoon, but really this will depend on the tomatoes that you're using and the barbecue sauce that you're using as well. After tasting that, I've realized that I need a little more heat in that pan as well. So I'm going to use some of this extra hot cayenne pepper powder, just a smidge, not too much, and some more salt and a touch of some black pepper powder as well. Give everything a good stir to mix it all up, and have a look at that color. This is so much better than the canned stuff that you get because it's got that sweetness of the barbecue sauce, but it's got all those other spices that really come through in the final dish as well. Now to the sauce, I've added 1 tin of cannellini beans. These are beautiful, light and creamy, and pair really well with that sauce. And we're just going to give that a good stir. These beans have been drained and rinsed and added to the pan. I use the no salt added beans from Woolworths. Now to the pan, I'm going to add just a tiny splash of water to help the beans heat through without burning any of that sauce. Stir everything thoroughly, and if needed, add a little more water to the pan. I go in with about a tablespoon or so of water a couple of times. I'm looking for a bean mix that's nice and saucy, but at the same time not too runny. This is the sort of consistency you're looking for. When it reaches this stage, go ahead and taste it one last time and adjust the seasonings if required, and your spicy bean mix is ready. Take the pan off the heat and set it aside. Now for this bake, I'm using a 9-inch round baking dish. Anything in a similar size will work well. Have this ready to go because you're going to layer your ingredients in as you prep them, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. In a pan over some medium heat, drizzle a little olive oil. To this, you're going to add some baby spinach. You can use regular spinach as well. I've used both turn out all right. Today I'm using one of the large bags of baby spinach that you get at both Coles and Woolies. This is about 280 grams or so, I believe. I've just washed them, drained them, and chopped them into smaller pieces. This is just half of that bag. I'm going to do this in 2 separate batches just to keep it more manageable. Alternatively, you can simply add the rest of your spinach to the same pan as this lot wilts down. Once the spinach has wilted, add in 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of breadcrumbs and season this with a little salt and some black pepper. Remember, we're going to season every layer, so don't go overboard at this stage because all of the salt that you use adds up. Give everything a good stir. What the breadcrumbs will do is prevent the bake from getting too soggy and absorb any excess moisture. Remember, this is only half of the spinach that I'm using. I'm going to do this all over again with the second batch. If you've added all of the spinach into the same pan, add in about 3 to 4 tablespoons of breadcrumbs and season it accordingly and stir everything through. Once your spinach and the breadcrumb mix looks fairly dry, like you can see here, we're going to take it off the heat and place it on the very bottom of our baking dish. And I'm going to repeat the same process again with my second batch of spinach. Spread all of that spinach into as even a layer as you can at the bottom of the baking dish, and over the spinach you're going to add in your spicy bean mix. Spread that around, take it right all the way to the edges to make sure that you're getting an even sort of layer. In the same pan, add another little drizzle of olive oil. And into the pan, I'm going to add about a quarter kilo, that's 250 grams of cup mushrooms that I've sliced up. And I'm going to saute these till they start softening and getting a little bit of color on. I've got the heat on a medium-high at this point because I don't want the mushrooms to get too soggy. I just want them to fry up nicely. Once the mushrooms have taken on a little bit of color, like you can see here, turn the heat down to a medium, and we're now going to add in our spices. I'm putting in a little bit of red chili flakes, some freshly cracked black pepper, and some salt. All of these three ingredients go in to taste. Give everything a quick stir through, and your mushroom layer is ready. Add your layer of mushrooms to your baking dish over the baked beans. Next, into the same pan, we're going to add a little more olive oil. Don't worry about those bits that are seeming like they're a little burnt. All of that is flavor, and we're going to take in all of those delicious bits very soon. Into the pan goes about 100 grams or so of corn kernels. I'm just using some frozen corn today. I'm going to deglaze the pan now by adding just a splash of water. I'd say about a tablespoon or so of water to the pan. This will help lift up all of those flavors in those brown bits that you see there. I'll do this a couple of times. Remember, you're not looking to add too much water here. You just want to get all of that flavor off the pan. And we're just going to let the corn cook till it's just about cooked through. You don't want to overcook the corn at this stage. You can tell the corn is ready when it starts looking a little plump. At this stage, season with a little salt, some red pepper flakes or red chili flakes, and some freshly cracked black pepper. The seasonings for this particular casserole are really simple and very minimal, but when everything comes together, it comes together beautifully. So give that corn one last stir and spread that over the mushrooms. And we're now moving on to the final element of our bean and spinach bake. That's the sauce. I'm going to make that in the very same pan in which we cooked up all of our veggies. I've put in a little splash of olive oil here. Now this sauce has a slightly different process compared to the white sauce that we'd made for our first bake. What we're going to do is add in about 2 tablespoons of butter. Again, I'm using Nuttlex over here to keep this plant-based. To this, I'm going to add 1 large clove of garlic, or about 2 to 3 smaller cloves of garlic, finely chopped, and about 1/4 of a small onion. You need a very little bit of onion here just to add a little flavor to everything. We're going to let this saute and soften up for a bit in that butter and oil mix. Once the onion and garlic have softened, I'm going to add in about 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Stir that through and let it cook off for about a minute or two until the rawness of that flour goes away. For flavor, I'm going to add in a very light sprinkling of mixed herbs. This is not even 1/8 of a teaspoon like you can see here. Just a little bit of a hint of herbs. And a little bit of red chili flakes, again to taste. Stir all of that through, and we're going to add in total about 2 cups of soy milk. Like I did before, I'm going to start off with a tiny splash of milk like you can see here and gradually add the rest of it in. Make sure to keep stirring while you do this. You season the sauce with a little bit of salt and some pepper to taste. And once that sauce has thickened up a little, like you can see here, you're ready to add in your cheese. Remember, this sauce will continue thickening a little bit as it stands, so you don't want to cook it too much further than this. Grate in a 1/4 cup of cheese into the sauce. Give that a nice mix, and like you can see, while we were grating that cheese, that sauce of ours has actually thickened a little bit more. Once that cheese gets all nice and melty, your sauce is ready. You can take it off the heat. Pour that sauce as evenly as you can over all of the vegetables in your baking dish and pop that into an oven that's preheated to 200 degrees Celsius and let it bake for about 15 minutes. And this is what your spicy bean and spinach bake will look like just out of the oven. It's still bubbling and it's extremely hot, so please resist the urge to dig in right at this point. Let it rest for a little bit before you can serve it up. So guys, that was it. If you liked today's video and would like to see more such videos, don't forget to give this one a thumbs up. And if you're new here and haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you really soon in the next one.